Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McClernand, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, welcome back. I'm always excited for my guest. This time it is Dustin Reekman. And Dustin, where are you calling in from?
I live in Illinois, but I live just outside St. Louis, Missouri.
So you live in Illinois, or you're from Illinois? You live in Illinois, but you're calling from. So in other words, you work in near St. Louis. Is that right?
So actually, I live in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is a suburb of St. Louis. It's confusing, but we're on the other side of the Mississippi River from St. Louis.
Okay. All right. So
usually they say St. Louis, but
okay, yeah, because I guess St. Louis, Missouri, but you live in Illinois. So I'm displaying my geographical ignorance of like Midwestern U.S. So well, awesome, man. I'm super excited to have you on the show today. And before we dive into your story, because that's really what we're here to talk about, I'd love to get just for you to let people know kind of where you're at and what you're doing currently.
Yeah, right now I'd say most importantly, I'm a husband of 21 years, which sounds crazy to say. I have 3 kids, and I have a couple different businesses. One, I'm a partner in an e-commerce brand that's growing really quickly called Fire Creek Snacks. And then I spend the majority of my time actually helping coaches and consultants and other e-com brands with marketing. So that brand is called Simple Success Coaching.
Awesome. Yeah. And I see behind you a logo for Engaged Marriage. Is that right?
Yes. So that's my third brand. But yeah, that is kind of key to my story. But that was my start online, was creating back in the day a blog, 2009, which is still around and has evolved into digital products and a membership site. And yeah, engagedmarriage.com is the other one. So, and as we'll get into my story, sometimes I intro myself as an engineer who helps married couples, sells meat sticks, and does marketing for coaches. All those things apply, but they get pretty confusing when you introduce them at once.
Right. Marketing meat sticks and marriage.
Yeah, there you go. That's better. Marketing meat sticks and marriage.
That's going to be like your new hook there. I like that. So, yeah. And, you're really in a really great place in life. You're enjoying success in your marriage. You're enjoying success in business, but it wasn't always this easy. And you had kind of a, maybe it's, I shouldn't say kind of a tough upbringing. You had a tough upbringing. You said, you grew up dirt poor. And where did you grow up, and kind of what sticks out in your mind from your childhood?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up actually just about an hour from here, but in a very rural area, farm town. So all my grandparents were ultimately farmers, not really successful ones, but they were farmers. Yeah. And so my what sticks out from my childhood is chaos, I guess is one way to say it. I can look back at it now with a smile, but at the time it was really painful. Yeah, my dad was an alcoholic. He was also 18 years older than my mom. So he was 42 when he had me, and she was 24. So it's quite a weird dynamic there. I had 2 half brothers who were all older than me. The younger one did live with me for a while, and my mom got pregnant with him in high school from a different guy and dropped out of high school. And then my dad was on his 3rd marriage when he was with my mom. And he really struggled with alcohol and was a union laborer and just didn't make it to work very often. And so through their own decisions, I can see in hindsight, we just didn't have a lot. So I grew up in the first house I lived in, got condemned when I was 9. So we moved to a different town for a while, then moved back to this original school district, and ended up graduating from there. And but lived in a trailer like from 8th grade till graduation, and just grew up without a lot of means, and was very blessed to get the opportunity to go to college. So we can get into that story if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, so this is really interesting, because I'm curious about kind of what goes to your head when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, living in this sort of chaotic family situation where you have half brothers, and you've got an older dad, a younger mom, and when you go to school, like, and maybe you see kids having somewhat of a maybe normal childhood, and
Right.
you're kind of in comparison, what was that like?
Super embarrassing. I think that I had a lot of kind of fear that people would find out what my home life was like, because there were times where I'd have to go live with my grandma for a while, and then then I'm getting dropped off at school by someone different, and people are asking those kind of questions. And I had friends at school, so there was like no one that lived around us. So the only person I ever associated with outside of school was like my brother. He was 6 years
Mm,
older than me. Ended up graduating early to get out of there and go to the Marine Corps. So for there's a long period of my teenage years that there was really no one around. And so I'd had these friendships. What always happened was I would make sure we hung out at their house, right? So
right. Okay.
one got me out of my house, but two, then no one would kind of know that I was this poor. And there was a time in high school that it's kind of ridiculous, but it kind of sticks with you. And I played football my last 2 years of high school. Once I could drive myself, I
Hmm.
was able to play football. So my senior year, like for homecoming, these cheerleaders would come to everyone's houses and they decorate, and they come in your bedroom and decorate. And when I came home and found out that these like the most popular girls in my class who knew me as like a smart, funny kid at school, uh, were like exposed to my family and my trailer, and the whole place smelled like smoke because my parents were heavy smokers. I was just
Mm.
mortified by that. So that's one that kind of is a good summary of how I felt growing up in that environment.
Right, really just hoping that nobody ever finds out about it. So then what's really interesting, I mean, so you have like the cheerleaders, they came, they saw your living, situation, all this kind of stuff. Did that translate into, your fears actually coming true, where people, now you've been exposed and people know that you live in a sort of a chaotic, impoverished situation?
No, it's a great question, and fortunately, no. I don't know what they thought of it or didn't think of it, and I never brought it up. And I was friends with everyone at school. I was certainly not the most popular kid, but I was like second or third in my class, and so I had respect at school, I guess, is a way to
Mm.
say that. And I did play sports, and but yeah, that didn't change. Funny enough, like my now wife was a high school cheerleader at my high school, so we're actually high school sweethearts. And
Okay.
she was a year younger though, so she wasn't the one coming in my room, but I'm sure she knows the back channel conversations that may have happened, and it could have been part of what helped me is that they knew her, So, but another quick tidbit.
Yeah.
I asked her out. She said no. Then I coerced her into a double date, and we actually hit it off great. And her mom ended up being the one to be like, give this kid a chance. She didn't really know me that well, and
Yeah.
but on our first date, or the first time I was introducing her to my parents, I'm driving home, and I had this old pickup truck that I had bought, and I'm like, just so you're prepared, like I live in a trailer, like I'm trying to like get rid of the awkwardness now, and like my
Yeah,
dad's
yeah.
kind of a weird dude, and she's just laughing. She thinks I'm joking, like. So I'm like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
serious. So we finally get there, and she's like, "Oh, you were serious," and she wasn't. She stuck with me. We were married 21 years, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was kind of her introduction to my to my parents. My dad was, you typecast someone, and you say, "Oh, he's an alcoholic," and he was, and there was a lot of
Mm-mm.
issues there, but he was also a super funny guy and very charismatic. And
Right.
yeah, he did a lot of great things for me. Introduced me to the outdoors and the love of hunting, and
Yeah.
so it is very foundational things with him. So I was kind of careful to be like, he wasn't that bad, and he's passed away, 8 years ago, so he's not here
Mm-mm.
to defend himself either.
Yeah, yeah, and so, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I think about like, now that you look back in hindsight, you're a coach yourself, and so on, and you look back. I think what's really interesting as adult is to look at our parents' behaviors through
Yeah.
the lens of an adult understanding. You go, oh, and so I'm curious what sort of insights you might have got, like as you reflect back on maybe your father's struggle with alcohol, for example, because he sounds like he was actually a good person, and
Hmm.
alcohol was a way to, I don't know, help him escape some of his inner demons or something like that.
I'm sure it was, and I've had the benefit, well, of one reconciling with him as an adult, and that's part of the story. But also, even since he's passed away, his two sisters have really become close. So my two aunts, who are nearly in their 80s.
Hmm.
One is in their 80s, but I get to spend a lot of time with them, and they share a lot of great stories and things growing up. So he was the oldest kid in the family. He
Yeah.
had a very rough life. Was raised on a farm. This is going to be very graphic, but he was like, I don't know how old, like 9 or 10. His testicles were actually like removed from him partially from a combine accident.
Oh man.
He also had some kind of gasoline explosion that burnt his leg and put him in the hospital for a long time as a kid. His dad was very abusive to the whole family, and just like they're German. I mean, like you tell me my last name. Both of his parents were German immigrants. Like they were hardcore, first generation Americans, and he just had a really, really rough life. And they said he started smoking when he was like 10. He started drinking when he was like 11, and just he was known as the class clown, but also like really attracted the ladies. Like he had his way about him. And then beyond his childhood, before I was ever conceived, he was actually pronounced dead 3 different times in his life.
Wow.
One from a drunk driving accident, where ironically he was the sober one and got hit head on, and had a really tough time with that. Actually, and then there was one car accident, solo accident, where he was drunk and he almost killed himself. And then he was a union laborer, and he was actually buried in a trench when he was in his early 20s, and was under. I had the newspaper clipping, so I thought it was just one of his stories, but I got the newspaper clipping, and he was buried for like something crazy, like 65 minutes in a sewer trench, and was resuscitated at the hospital and survived. So yeah, so like you're right though, the perspective is important. It's like, well, why wouldn't you drink and try to forget all that? And I didn't even mention this when this was after he's out of the house. So he left, went to the army, got kicked out of the army. And then when he was probably in his late 20s, his dad committed suicide in their family barn, hung himself. And so, so any visit back to there, I'm sure, was traumatic. And so lots of crazy stuff. But I've joked, and it's probably something I should really pursue, like writing a book about his life. Like there's so many crazy stories that people have shared, especially since he passed away. He had a very interesting life and did a lot of different things for sure. And there was that dark chapter that unfortunately was most of my childhood, but he did get better as he got older. So
yeah, I mean, I think about that, and compassion is a really essential part of the work that I do. I speak about it very often. I'm even writing a book about it right now. And I hear all of that and I go, oh, okay, this all makes sense.
yeah.
So he wasn't just some like jerk who had an alcohol problem who liked to wail on people or something like that. This was someone who
he got in some bar fights, but he always lost. He was 6'5", 230. He was a big guy.
Yeah.
But I guess he was a gentle giant. Yeah. And then, like for my mom, like she's still alive and we have a good relationship, but she has a lot of social anxiety. And and like then I think back now I'm 43, so like I'm basically the age my dad would have been when he found her in a restaurant as a waitress and wooed her, and I'm like, it's kind of creepy, like she's way younger, but like now I know more about her history. She was sexually abused as a child. Like I said, she got pregnant in high school, dropped out, and I'm sure she was very much seeking anyone's attention and help, and as a young 20-something single mom.
No kidding.
And so that's the situation she found herself in. And in high school, like before they got divorced, they ultimately got divorced when I was in high school. They had a lot of resentment, of course, towards him, but also towards my mom, because I really felt like their marriage was a trap. And like I was getting old enough to be wanting to defend her, and like, you've got to get out of this situation. Like I was starting to be mature enough to have those kind of conversations. But now I see, now I understand the trap that she was in mentally, and something she's never fully recovered from, and never will, because she unfortunately had a very traumatic childhood also.
Yeah. Wow. And again, I just think about that, and my heart just goes out to both of them. And I think like we hear these stories and they're actually not that uncommon.
Yeah. I think very, very common, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's like, I think, my goodness, like us human beings, like we're immensely resilient, but most people, especially we think back that generation, I'm 40, that generation just buried these stories.
Yeah.
And they buried them with alcohol and dealt with them in other ways. Like there wasn't really, like nobody talked about it.
Yep.
And so as you learn about it, I mean, I think it's really powerful, just even the ability to look back with compassion, reflect on it and go, man, like, now I, at least I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I love the way that you're bringing this out and phrasing it, because I think in small doses, I've had these realizations, but you're 100% right that if you told me these were your parents, I would be like, I'd have so much compassion, sympathy, empathy for them. And then, and for you. And then, but when it's you, it's like, you obviously go through your own emotions, especially as a child and a teenager. And I feel like I've been very blessed to respond to that in what turned out to be a positive way, right? Because you kind of, when you're exposed to that level of stuff, you either
Yeah.
follow that model or you completely reject the models to such an extreme that you do something almost completely opposite. And so far so good. I've been much more on the opposite
Yeah.
side. So.
Yeah. So and you met your now wife as a high school sweetheart. You tried to woo her on a date first time she rejected you, but then like a double date made it sort of safer to kind of go out with you or whatever.
Yep.
And like what attracted you to her?
It was funny. So I was actually, I said she didn't know me that well, but I was actually, her brother was in my class.
Okay.
So all the way back into junior high, like him and I weren't really that good of friends. We are now, but she was around sometimes because she had an older brother. She was 1 year behind us. So I got to know her like all the way back in like middle school and just thought she was cute. And then in high school, what ended up happening was she was too young in her class to take driver's ed. She got kicked out of her driver's education class, which got
That's
her
funny.
put into my PE class. And she basically became my target. Like, oh, she's the cutest girl in my PE class, and I'm gonna flirt with her. And yeah, and then I mentioned hunting, so I like to bow hunt. And I have pretty good at archery, and so
Yeah.
we did an archery unit early in the class, and I used that opportunity to like show her how to do it. And
Let me show you how to hold the bow.
exactly, yeah, so cheesy.
No wasted opportunities there.
Absolutely. So then I asked her out, and she said no. And like I said, and then and right around that time was our homecoming, and she had already had a date to homecoming. So I I tell my kids this, and they say you're a creep. So I was like, no, I'm persistent. So
Yeah.
I went to homecoming with friends, and then I found out where she was going with her date after, and they were bowling. So I made sure I got a lane right next to them. I flirted with her like the whole time they were on their date, and it wasn't long after that she finally relented. And like I said earlier, I found out later that her mom was like, he seems like a good kid. Like, yeah, you don't know him that well, but just give him a shot. And I'm like, I'm very thankful for that. But I now have a 15-year-old daughter, and I'm like, I would not be saying that. I'd be like, just no, don't go on any dates, because she was 14, almost 15, and I would just turned 16, so we're like a year apart. But yeah, so she was pretty darn young in hindsight, and I was pretty persistent.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it'd be interesting to hear like her perspective on that too. Like what kind of, I think one of the things I like to do with this podcast is whenever I get an opportunity is to actually interview the other person in the story, the other half of the story, so to speak. So maybe that's something we can, if she'd be down, in another season or another
Yeah.
chapter of this podcast, that'd be kind of a fun story to call back to. But, so she relented, you guys got together. Did you stay together from the time you started dating? Like that
Yeah.
was it?
Yeah, we never broke up. I was very blessed to, like I said, did well in school despite
Mhm.
what was going on at home, and so I'd planned to go to the University of Illinois, kind of our big university, and study engineering. And before I got to quite applying to that, she told me, again, she's a year younger. So, well, I'm planning to go to SIUE, a Southern Illinois University, which is actually where I'm living right now, that same town. I said, really? Well, I'll apply there. And I ultimately ended up very blessed again. I got a full ride scholarship academically to go there in that kind of an emerging engineering program. So I ended up being there. And then when she came to school the next year, I was around, and we've had our we had our times that we were not too happy with each other, but we've technically been together ever since I was a junior in high school. Yep.
So junior is 11th grade, is that
Yeah,
right?
11th grade. So I was 16.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I would expect that you've had occasional times where you weren't too happy with each other as human beings, because I think that's part of like coexisting
Right.
and like growing and developing and whatnot. So you got into a career as an engineer, which is like I think a really there's an element of prestige to it. It can become quite a well-paying career, and job stability and whatnot. And so, did it feel like you'd broken the mold? Like, was there that thought running through your head as you were graduating? Like, I've broken the mold, like, because I think you hit the nail on the head. We tend to go one way or the other, where we can develop these maladaptive patterns and behaviors, and we just continue to repeat the cycle that was sort of imprinted on our brain at an impressionable age.
Yep.
And you had this determination, like, this is not going to be my future.
Yeah, no, that was 100%. And engineering, kind of the idea of civil engineering, really came out of my dad's work. So he was a union laborer. So he was the grunt, pouring the asphalt and the concrete and stuff out in the heat of the day. But he was building cool stuff. He was building bridges, locking dams, roads. And so I was always attracted to that. And I thought, I'd like to be the guy that designs those bridges. And so that's really what drew me to engineering. And then my math and science and stuff scores were good, so I was kind of encouraged to go that way. So college was another major time of upheaval and change in my life, mostly all in a positive way, really. So I was going through engineering school. Again, Bethany, my now wife, was there, and I decided between my freshman and sophomore years to join the Catholic Church. And so I went through a complete, 9-month process there of learning and contemplating and deciding. And so I ultimately ended up getting, as a sophomore of college, I was 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. I got baptized, confirmed, like all this stuff. So I had no faith life growing up. And, and then, so that was a big change. And then right around that same time I mentioned, so my parents got divorced right before I met Bethany, ironically, in high school. So as I was a sophomore in high school, they got divorced. I was very happy about that. It was a healthier thing. I lived with my mom. And so I got through those last couple of years of high school. And then I knew that they were like talking to each other again while I was at school, and that I was in contact with him, and he was really trying to work on himself and get sober. What I did not know is that they were really getting back together. And so at some point, my sophomore year of college, I got a phone call from my mom saying, "Hey, would you and Bethany want to stand as our witnesses? We're getting remarried." I'm like, "Really? Okay." So the courthouse steps in that same small town, they got remarried, and Bethany, who's still my girlfriend but not my wife yet, we were their two witnesses when they got remarried. So it's pretty wild. So that was college. And then then the month after I graduated from college, Bethany and I got married. She was still in college. So there's a lot that happened in that 4 or 5 year period when I was at school.
Well, and that's a really interesting thing. So you said you didn't grow up with kind of any faith background. Like, did you have any belief in God or anything like that? Or you started getting questions and wondering, and how did you find your way to Catholicism, in particular, that denomination?
Yeah. So a couple factors there. So growing up, some neighbors were Mormon one time and some were Presbyterians. I've been to a few, at least socially, around Christian people. And it always felt like the natural fit for me. And I always did believe in God. And my dad grew up very Lutheran and had to go to Lutheran school his whole up till 8th grade. And I think he always said, I went to enough church as a kid to rest,
I'm good for the rest of my life. Yeah.
And then my mom was Methodist, and they also went to church, but part of her abuse story is tied to that. So I think she was real resentful to that church. And so I was certainly never, it never came up being baptized or any of that stuff. And so part of it was started in high school. So when I started dating Bethany, her parents were Catholic and she's Catholic, and they were practicing, and I could see how great their household was. She had 2 brothers, and one was in my class. I got to know him a lot better. And I was like, this is great. So in hindsight, on Engaged Marriage, part of our story, it's about they were really one of the main catalysts for helping me see a model of Christian marriage. And that was very attractive to me. Then I was at school my freshman year. I was in an honors wing, and we were drinking beer and stuff. And but we were basically philosophizing, however you say that. Yeah, there you go. And we were kind of
waxing poetic.
We were kind of debating about religion, and I kind of felt this fervor of defending Christianity and why it is true and all these things. So I had some conviction there. I'd been going to mass a few different times with Bethany's family. And so that was really it. It was very much what most people would hear that and assume it was, hey, we're going to get married. You're going to have to be Catholic. You're going to marry my daughter, sort of thing. And fortunately there was none of that. There was no pressure or anything. And it was very much my own choice, but she was a natural to kind of be my sponsor. And so she ended up, I guess you call it my godparent. She was the one that went with me, when I was baptized and everything. So yeah, so that's kind of the faith journey from starting back then. And that same passion for healthy marriage and Christian marriage, brought us into marriage ministry, which is kind of where we got into Engaged Marriage, which brought me into online marketing, which brought me in all the other stuff. So it all in hindsight really does tie together.
Yeah. And we'll fast forward a few years. I mean, because I think the foundational years are really fascinating because it very often shapes kind of the path that we take. And so you kind of, I guess you enjoyed a normal life. You started a family. You're working in this career in engineering. But at some point in time, maybe you felt a little bit restless. I want to do something more.
Yeah. And so in hindsight, I would have never been able to tell you what it was, but I definitely had an entrepreneurial itch. Even growing up, my grandma would take me out and help me collect beer cans, and I'd, take them to the aluminum place, get some money. I would take tomatoes from people's gardens and go sell them to other people. I'd flip baseball cards. I was always capitalist entrepreneurial, but I had, of course, no at all case studies for that, any examples, any mentor.
Right.
So for me, like the very ultimate thing I could do is go get a college education and engineering degree, which would get me a good job. And it did all that. And that was awesome. But yeah, so I worked really hard. I was in the specialty of traffic engineering. Ended up not building bridges, but helping people get to and from them quicker and more safely. And I actually had that career for 17 years. So there's a lot of things that were happening at the same time. So in 2009, so I started my engineering career in 2001. And in 2009 is Engaged Marriage.
Yep.
And we were doing marriage ministry through the church and helping people prepare for marriage and doing presentations at retreats, and found that we really liked it. And we had some interesting stuff that had happened, obviously in our family of origin, but also in just our early years of marriage, financial stuff and communication issues that we overcame. And so we had stories to tell people, and we really enjoyed it. So I kind of had this feeling when we were on vacation. I'm like, I need a creative outlet. It's been 7 years of numbers and engineering, and there's got to be a better way to deliver this message. Like, we have a lot of stuff to share, great resources, but like we're doing it in church basements, and this was like the heyday of blogging was coming on. Like, everyone was starting to blog. And so I was like, I came home from vacation and figured out on my own how to build websites and created Engaged Marriage, and just basically started writing about our life 3 times a week for several years. Yeah, ultimately ended up writing a book called 15-Minute Marriage Makeover that's still out there on Amazon. And we did some speaking around that, and we've continued marriage ministry. So yesterday we were doing pre-Cana, the marriage preparation workshop just yesterday. And we talk about healthy sexuality and like things like natural family planning. So they're somewhat controversial topics. They're often misunderstood topics. So we get a lot of fulfillment in like being able to share our story around that and help young couples at least understand what it is. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that got me to the first business online, and it started to become an actual business, and we're making some pretty good sales. So that gave me like the idea. The seed was planted, like maybe I don't have to do engineering forever. Right. But we were having 3 kids. My wife became a stay-at-home mom. So 2009 to 2017, I was running Engaged Marriage. I took on some marketing clients, just people that came to me for help. But 2017 was the year where it was like the year I'm going to make a big change.
Right.
And so I developed this passion for digital marketing, online marketing. I knew how to sell stuff, do sales funnels, create membership sites. Like, I had all these like other skills that had nothing to do with my day job.
Right.
And I had ascended in my day job, as we all tend to do, to the point where I kind of hated it because I was no longer doing engineering. I created a whole department and was hiring people and, managing people, 20 people. And I just got tired of the management side. This is not what I want to do. But it's a super difficult, transition to make. And the story right about that is like 2017 in the summer. I can remember like it was yesterday. I just had like what I would describe it as like an epiphany. It was just at some point something hit me that said, hey, it's not a permanent decision. Like, because I had my whole identity wrapped up in engineering. I was seeing this idea that I'm the only breadwinner. I'm responsible for insurance. We have 3 kids.
Right.
What idiot would throw away a 6-figure salary and all this like status, that I had in the industry. And I'd been teaching at the university, and like I had, I was pretty on engineering. So, but with that said, I was like, I know I can make money other ways. I just need to really focus on it. So I had a really important conversation with my wife and with our kids. And I said, I work a lot already. I'm going to work a whole lot for the next 6 months. And like, basically, let me try this. I want to try to get some marketing clients and see if I can build up that side of my world while I'm still doing my engineering job, and was able to do that. And so kind of built up a war chest. So at the end of 2017, I was able to say goodbye to the engineering career. And my whole attitude was, I'm going to know by that December if this is viable. And then if it's viable, I'm going to try it for 6 months. I'm going to commit to it. We got enough runway that we can eke by.
Right, yeah.
And the rest is history, as they say, because a lot of other things started happening at that point in my story with entrepreneurship.
It's so funny, like fascinating, really, like the doors that just open up when you open yourself up to possibilities.
You take that one step, and then all of a sudden it's a whole different vista, right? Like all of a sudden there's all these different opportunities that you didn't know were there, and you can't see them until you take the next step. And that's man, that's been my whole story. So,
Yeah. And you do that with like a family, and a lot of people would be scared to make that leap, I guess, to leave that security.
I was
And
scared. I was
yeah,
scared.
absolutely. So you're juggling the scare, the fear with the like this burning desire and this belief that I could do it. And what kind of pushed you over the edge?
I guess I turned 40. I think that's probably a big part of it that summer. Oh no, I didn't. I guess I was 30. I was 38. So I guess I was approaching 40, and like I don't know. I just had this feeling like it's now or never sort of thing. Like I'm gonna really regret not trying it. And then, like I said, the big thing was the realization that I could just try it, and if I wasn't very good at the entrepreneur thing, I could just go be an engineer again because
Right. Yeah.
my company wanted me to stay, and like I had other companies that would hire me. So that was the
Mm-hmm.
biggest like thing that got me over the fear. And then I think, yeah, just in the fact that I'd already been getting some marketing clients and it was working well, like it's like things were starting to all kind of merge in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And then where do the meat sticks come into it?
Yeah.
Because you've
So
got marriage, marketing, and now meat sticks.
yeah, we gotta get the meat sticks in there. So and after I left my job, I basically just started everywhere I went. I was like, yeah, I do marketing. Like I'll do Facebook ads, I can do strategy, whatever. And so I got a bunch of clients. They're all local. So I had some online clients already, but like my dentist became a client. My
Mm,
sister-in-law had a restaurant. She became a client. My real estate broker became a client. And I was building websites for most of these people and then doing marketing on the backside. And one of those clients was a butcher shop who opened up here in Edwardsville, in the town like I said, I now live in. It was their third location, family owned, third generation guy. And I
mm.
didn't know him, but he went to one of his partners in this location. It was in Bethany's class, and
Okay.
also was trying to court her the same time I was. Um,
That's funny.
yeah, so small world, very small world. And so I through him got lunch with him and this guy named Ryan Hansen, who's was the owner, the third generation owner of this company. And so I ended up doing marketing for their brick and mortar butcher shops
Mm,
and built an email list for them and like started helping them see more strategy around what they were doing. And so it was going really well. He had built a hickory smokehouse in the, so here's before I go on with this story,
mm-mm.
I talk about a small world. So the town that I grew up in is called Jerseyville, Illinois.
Yeah.
And it's a small farm town. It's the county seat. And I lived out in, you know, way outside of town, but that was my town. And so when I'm in this meat shop in Edwardsville, where I live now, again, I found this jerky. I was like, this is cool, really cool branding, you know. And like, so I looked at, I was, who makes this? And it says like made in Jerseyville, Illinois. And I'm like, what? Like, this is my hometown. There's nothing in Jerseyville. And then I realized that the home location of this butcher shop was in Jerseyville. I'm like, oh, this same guy must be making this brand because it was branded completely different. And it turned out that was the case. And he was in this transition time of wanting to go from whole muscle, like traditional jerky, into a snack stick
Mm,
product because he saw that was like an emerging trend in 2018. Turned out he was absolutely right. So we're just working on his other marketing, and he one day says, "Hey, I'm selling this like in golf courses and my own shops, just locally." He's like, "I really want to. Do you think we could sell this online?" I said, "Sure. You know, I'll try anything." So I for free, I built him a Shopify store, and we started marketing it to the email list I had created for his local butcher shops, and we were getting some sales. And then we ended up doing like a rev share agreement, and then ultimately in 2019, I was kind of at his side a lot with this, and we ended up going to 12 trade shows. So we traveled together, and we're like just selling and sampling, and like we're really starting to understand the messaging, what people cared about, and the fact that this was like a legit, excellent product.
mm.
And yeah, ultimately I became a business partner with him in the brand. So yeah, that's how I got to Meat Sticks. It wasn't, and I actually,
Yeah.
ironically, I did have it was really cool that it was my hometown. It was really
Yeah.
cool. I found out that the Hanson name sounded familiar to me, and I was like, "This my grandpa used to talk about this guy," and it turns out that Ryan's grandpa and my grandpa, who we didn't talk about really, my mom's stepdad, but he was my grandpa, and he was really the core father figure in my life growing up.
Mm.
They were in the VFW together because they both fought in World War II, and so it's like I know for a fact my grandpa and his grandpa drank beer and played poker in
Right.
Jerseyville, right? And like now he's my business partner, and it's just kind of cool.
It's just
So that was
serendipitous.
cool.
Yeah.
Two of my girls are gluten free, and one of the big things about our product is it's like a craft meat stick, so it's like a Slim
Right.
Jim but healthy, no
Yeah.
artificial
Yeah.
ingredients, no allergens, no gluten. And so my daughters really like the product, and I was like, well, that's saying something because they don't really eat that much meat, but they're eating these teriyaki sticks like they're going out of out of style.
Yeah.
And then I was eating keto, low carbs. So I was like, this all kind of makes sense to me. You know, like I had a story to tell around the brand, even though I hadn't created it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I got into Meat Sticks. And then, like I mentioned, the Simple Success coaching business, that's 75% of how I spend my time now. Engaged Marriage still exists, pretty passive. Fire Creek, I'm still engaged in, but I sit in more of a strategic role there. So it's not a day-to-day thing that much. And then the Simple Success coaching, though, completely came out of nowhere. I didn't have any intention of being a marketing or business coach. I'd had all these marketing clients. Some of that shifted on my choice. Some of that shifted because of COVID, because these were all local businesses that were heavily affected by the shutdowns here in Illinois. And so I kind of had some bandwidth, and I decided to try to do some different things with Fire Creek with our marketing. So rather than almost all e-commerce, brands, they'll do Facebook ads, and then they'll get a return on the ad spend. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I felt like there's better way, because I felt like this is a special brand with a real story and like a heritage to the brand, and the way it's made is very different. And so I booked my first podcast in summer 2020, and just went on to tell the story. And it was it's a Side Hustle show with Nick Loper. Like, it wasn't anything to do with health or meat or anything. It was just like a random show that I was telling how I partnered with a local business to bring a product online. And that was a cool story. And it turned out that like we sold a bunch of Meat Sticks. And I was like, this is kind of crazy, because I gave a coupon code. I knew exactly where they came from. I was like, that really worked. And I got on another and another, and I ended up getting on the first 12 podcasts that I pitched, I got yeses to with a single email. And I was like, well, I'm pretty good at that part too, because I'd done a bunch of copywriting over the years. And anyway, so that kind of became my thing. And as I started being on more and more of these podcasts, a lot more people started reaching out and being like, hey, how'd you get on these shows? Or like, how'd you grow your e-commerce brand? Like, I need help with my brand. And so it all became this like inbound organic thing where I started coaching people on what I call partnership marketing, which is this idea of getting your message featured on someone else's platform in a way that's a win for everybody. And podcasting is an excellent example of that, right? So today, like I'm your guest. What's in it for me? Well, exposure to your audience, getting to tell my story. Maybe there's someone out there who resonates with my story and we end up becoming friends, or they become a client. What's in it for you? If I do a good job, it helps you grow your show. I'm going to support your show, and it gives you fresh content, right? And then for your audience, if it's a good story or they learn something, that's a win for them. So like, no one here has to give. We all just get to win. And so that's my view on marketing in general. And then that's how I grew Fire Creek. We got 7 figures without running any paid ads. We do now run paid ads as another channel. And we just found out last week that we're going into Walmart. We've had some pretty big stuff happen. And the core of it, though, has been partnerships and relationships. So I know I ran right from Meat Sticks into marketing.
That's okay.
But that's, again, like that dot in my story, I would have never guessed. But the Meat Sticks took me there. Publicly marketing Fire Creek got me coaching. And then I did a bunch of one-on-one coaching, and then that became small groups. And I realized there's like a system to this. And now I do like these accelerator programs, which are, higher end group coaching programs with what I call mission-driven entrepreneurs. So people with a story, people that want to go out there and share that story in a very relational way, and grow their profits in the process. So you can tell I get passionate about it. That's what I love to do, and I love that I'm able to like do it with Fire Creek that's my sandbox, and then you get to teach it to other people and different types of businesses. Yeah, because what lights me up, what I've found, is variety and being in the room, the virtual room, with other people who have a similar passion. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dustin, it's been a genuine pleasure chatting with you. You've got a great story. It's amazing the different things that you've overcome to get to where you're at now. Before we tie things up with a pretty little bow here, where is the best place if people want to reach you or contact you or know more about you? Where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, simple. The simplest place has links to everything else is simplesuccesscoaching.com. My email is Dustin, Dustin, at simplesuccesscoaching.com. So absolutely reach out if you guys have questions, if you want to connect. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And lastly, if people listening to this, if they were to take one nugget away from this conversation, what would you like them to take away?
I'd say serve first. I mean, I know it's simplistic, but in everything I've ever done professionally and hopefully largely personally, it's always been about serving first and then the law of reciprocation takes over, right? Like I went to Ryan first and gave him really good ideas for his butcher shop before he ever paid me anything. I built a Shopify store before I ever had any idea I'd be a partner. I did a bunch of free coaching with people about all these topics with podcast guesting and partnerships before I ever asked anyone to pay me. And I think that we need more of that in the world. And I think if there's a relationship you really desire, there's a network, someone you really want in your network, like spend a little time and try to lead with the win for them without any expectation of return. And the beautiful part of that is you'll get way more return with that attitude.
Yeah.
And that would be my encouragement to everyone listening in kind of any aspect of their life.
I love that. Yeah, just to serve first. And I love how you've defined that as well. And it's like lead with value. You don't go into it saying, well, what can you do for me? But it's, what can I do for you? And and let it go from there, because that's
how can I help you?
Right.
Simple. Yeah.
So simple. Well, Dustin, it's been such a pleasure, and I really look forward to the time we get to chat again. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely, John. It's been fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.